Hello, Eric.
Hello, Richard. I have to tell you, in all of the weeks that we have our weekly interesting conversations, this one I've been looking forward to the most. And I'm not kidding, and you know that. You were off the grid for a few days. I couldn't reach you, and I'm so curious about the experience, and then coming back, into the world in which we live. How was the off the grid experience?
It was too short, but it was
That's
great.
it. Too short. I need every detail. I'm
Yeah,
a
that
New
was,
Yorker.
it was very intense. Like we kind of bit off a bit more than we planned to chew, but we chewed it. And when you go through something hard together, that is a great time of camaraderie and bonding. So, but being like, it was the first time, Eric, in probably 10 years that like my cell phone didn't work for 48 hours or more, you know?
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to be disconnected in that way and to just be doing simple things like trying to stay warm and make sure you eat and drink and don't get lost, you know, in unfamiliar territory. So it really, um, reminded me of something that I already knew, but in a much more visceral way, which is that so much of what um, we're preoccupied with every day really is very manufactured and very artificial. Like, I mean, in months past, look, Jerome Powell has been dominating the airwaves, and he gave a press conference on Thursday. Normally, I would have been glued to my screen, but instead, I was sitting on a moss-covered rock in the middle of a rhododendron covered river that was very hard to get to. And I didn't know Jerome Powell existed. I did not even care what was happening with the Fed funds rate. And I think that's an important place that we all are able to get to at least a few times a year,
Well,
where you
what
really
you
are just
say?
unplugged from what seems like reality, but it's not.
But you've stepped back into reality or not reality.
Yeah.
We all have our phones, 24/7. Uh, how many of the lessons learned while off the grid can be applied to the way that you'll live today, or not? Do you forget about them all 48 hours when you
No,
back?
I mean, I guess one of the most striking things is that when multitasking is a lot less um, doable when you're off the grid and when your phone doesn't work, et cetera, right? So you're like doing one thing at a time, you're cutting wood or you're, getting water or you're just kind of walking through the woods. And it reminds you that that's actually a good place to be, and I mean, I don't know about you, but I see my own online life. It's like, I mean, I'm jumping to 100 different things a day,
Yeah.
and I can't walk to my computer to do something without ending up doing something that I didn't intend to do by
Yes.
coming to the computer, right?
A
So,
standard joke of how many open tabs do you wake up to in the morning from the day before?
oh,
All
that's
the places you had no intention of going to, but you did,
yeah,
which I would guess is different than pumping and filtering water.
it's very different, and I think that this online life is out of balance in that regard. I think it's kind of crazy, and I don't think it's sustainable. Um, I really think people are kind of reaching a saturation limit, and I think everybody's trying to figure out, how do I unplug from this a bit? Um, and with this, but with the media increasingly in fewer and fewer hands, it's um we think that we're making choices as we jump from one thing to another online, but really there are a bunch of choices that are being presented to us, that are kind of artificial, right? So, look, when I say too short, like that's what I'm talking about. Like you just started to, in just 72 hours, you just start to kind of breathe a sigh of relief. That you can let that train go by, and not feel anxious
But
about
so
missing something.
when you're using a compass, which you literally did for 3 days,
Yeah,
contrasted against the world in which you come home to,
yeah,
where algorithms are guiding us, pulling us in every way. Well,
right,
many people, I think, know I need a break from I need a break. My algorithm doesn't really want to give me a break.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
unless people change their physical environments, which you did dramatically,
Yep.
won't it be increasingly more difficult, even if we do have a recognition level that we need to turn off every now and
Yeah,
then?
and I think with the advent of ChatGPT and other large language models, right? Like one of the risks here is that the ability to um like capture our attention, like is going up another notch, right? Like the output that is going to be able to be generated through AI, and is another level. It's another level. Ultimately, it's not very substantive, which is why I don't think it's going to last. But I do think for a period of time, like we're going to be hit with even more hard to resist content that seems really compelling. But what you realize is after you consume it for a year, that you really weren't pursuing any of your own aims and goals and producing something of value to you or your family. You were really being consumed by, the media landscape that really is just trying to get your attention, ultimately for some purpose that you didn't consent to.
And what would you say about the reality or lack thereof? So you come back from one world, you come back into this world.
Yeah.
Any fresh take on the banking crisis, or different take, or surprises?
Mm, well, I am thinking about it a lot because I'm actually going to be talking about it um, at an event this week. And I think it's a real crisis. I don't think that the three banks that we've seen go under so far in the US, four if you count Credit Suisse, I think these are tips of the spear. And, most of the message going on right now is that, these were anomalies. They were particularly at risk, but the forces that took down those four banks are forces that are at work throughout the whole banking system. And whether or not, these four banks were particularly vulnerable to those forces or not, those forces are in play, And so, um, yeah, when you kind of do unplug from all the daily churn and chatter, you do start to reflect a bit on the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
And my sense is that ultimately, Eric, I think we're in a confidence crisis in the economic system itself. And I think that it's gotten too divided. It's the gap, the wealth gap and the values gap is at historic levels. And we're in a long-term cycle that's very late, very long in the tooth. So I think ultimately there are major restructurings that are going to need to happen before we can all agree it's time to rebuild. I just don't see how, you know, the world or America comes together and rallies, you know, without first having to really feel more pain and finally decide that, this pain isn't worth it. And let's figure out how to rebuild. Let's make that the priority. I just don't see that happening just yet.
I have one last question for you.
Sure.
Being attentive to your portfolio or not,
Hmm.
how did it feel you couldn't be attentive to your portfolio on any given day when you're off the grid?
Yeah.
Did that cross your mind? Did that impact your
Well, I mean, I'm in a pretty conservative position right now, and so I didn't have anything exposed that I, you know, wasn't didn't plan to be exposed for years. So, but it was interesting to go away and come back and see that essentially nothing had changed.
yeah.
And then to think about all the noise that happened, all the ups and downs, during the days that normally would have, I would have had feelings about.
Right.
um, that in the end it amounted to, uh, a lot of noise.
So all those feelings, interestingly enough, that you may have had or may not have had during those
Hmm.
days that you were out,
Yeah.
that you just basically took a pass on.
Yeah. Save a
Uh,
lot of time and energy,
it's a lot of time and energy, and you did something great with your own kids.
Yeah. And you're putting time into those relationships. And ultimately, I think that people are seeing, that it's ultimately our relationships that matter the most to us. I
Well,
think
I'll
it's
tell you
people
what.
that matter to people, and we've really lost sight of that. And so it was good
Well,
to have no way of escaping it for a
I,
few
I
days.
I do hope that people exactly like you will keep reminding people about that, because it really is something to think about. For 3 days, all the noise you didn't listen to, for 3 days that you were present with your two sons,
Yeah.
where's
Yeah.
the value in that?
Priceless.
Priceless.
Good talking with you, Eric.
Nice talking to you as always, Richard, and I learned a lot today.
Thanks.